Hello, Champagne Nightmares! Welcome back to my channel. I'm your girl, Miss J, and I am here with another horror-related video. And this is not just Gore, but it's also Geek. I am super excited to talk about Friday the 13th, the game. So we're going to talk a little bit about the game and my experience playing it. Girl, I've been getting through lockdown any way that I can. This quarantine is driving me crazy, but I've been playing a lot of video games, and I have some thoughts on some things that could be added into the game that would really change up the gameplay and make it much more interesting. If you're interested in finding out my thoughts on what could be added to Friday the 13th, the game, go ahead and stick around. We're getting into it right now. Now, in quarantine, I have been rediscovering my love of video games. I'm not a huge gamer, and I'm not very good at gaming, but I do love a lot of games. I love Mortal Kombat games. I've been rediscovering the World of Warcraft, and one thing that I've been playing a whole lot is Friday the 13th, the game. Now, right when we were first going on to lockdown, they were having some sort of holiday special. I forget what the holiday was, but Friday the 13th, the game was having one of their special double XP weekends, and they've actually decided to extend that while we're in quarantine. So as of right now, when I'm recording this, they're still giving away double XP on all of your matches, which is very exciting. So I have been leveling up, I've been getting new outfits, new skins for Jason, new kills, all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm very excited about that. Now, people who have been following the game for a while know that there hasn't been anything really new added for a long time. The reason why is that the rights around Friday the 13th are currently in a legal dispute. So, long story short, this is complicated and legal and all kinds of shit that is... I am too pretty to be smart. I can't handle it. But basically, Sean Cunningham was the director of the original Friday the 13th. Victor Miller was the writer of the original Friday the 13th. Normally, after a certain amount of time, the rights for the characters that are written by a screenwriter revert back to them after a certain amount of time. Now, obviously, this has developed into a huge franchise, and there's been some back and forth. That's actually the reason why, some people don't know that that's why some of the later movies in the Friday the 13th franchise don't say Friday the 13th. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X. The reason why those were titled that way is because they couldn't use the name Friday the 13th. At that time, based on where the lawsuit was at. So that lawsuit is still ongoing. There are potentially some things that are happening. There's been some oral arguments. Who knows if there's going to be any sort of resolution to that. Now, the studios, Gun Media, and the studios who put out Friday the 13th, the game, had announced that they're not able to do any further development. So they've been focusing on bug fixes and patches. But with motion on this lawsuit, and the fact that Friday the 13th, the game, has kept up momentum and people are still interested in it, I'm wondering if they're going to go back to development if there is some sort of movement. Obviously, they couldn't keep developing while they were in this sort of limbo place. So I don't think that they've probably been working on much content in the interim, but it would be interesting. Now, right before everything got locked down with the game, they had announced if you played through the virtual cabin, and if you played through it 3 times, you ended up finding out that they had developed a Grendel map as well as Uber Jason. So those are both from Jason X, which is the 10th installment in the Friday the 13th franchise, and that was basically Jason in space. And so Grendel is the spaceship that they end up on, and Uber Jason is what people call the Jason who wakes up on this spaceship, and he ends up getting upgraded with the ship's technology. And so if you played through, you got this sneak peek of Uber Jason, and they had announced that there was going to be this brand new map, and there was going to be this new Jason, and then it was like, oh, because of the lawsuit, and because we are a licensed game, we cannot add any new content. Now, Victor Miller did not write this version of Jason, but it all has to do with the fact that it's licensed under the Friday the 13th name. So they have said we're not able to add anything new. They said a new tree would be a new thing added to the game. So they're not able to add anything new, so they stopped development. However, I am a dreamer, I'm a hopeless romantic, and so I hope that they'll be able to add new things to the game. So I came up with my list of what I think would be great fantasy additions. And the reason why I did this is because I was thinking about the new map, the Grendel. And that's a spaceship. It's much more contained than sort of an open world area of a campground with cabins and a lake and all these sorts of things. It's going to be much more contained, so the gameplay would have to shift. So in terms of how they're going to do it, I thought there's some potential here for it to be really interesting in terms of changing the mechanics of the gameplay and how the victims and Jason interact with each other. I was interested that they might have been on the verge of pushing gameplay in a new and interesting direction. So when I was coming up with my list, I didn't just stick with the gameplay as it is. I made sure that I added some things that I think could be really interesting and that could really reinvigorate the game itself. So I would love to hear your thoughts as we're going through. In the comments below, make sure you're reacting to any of the things on my list, and also make sure you're giving me your recommendations. What counselors would you like to see in the game? What maps would you like to see? Are there any specific costume packs? Or how would you like to see gameplay change in Friday the 13th, the game? For number 10, I just put in some additional Jason X content. So because they had announced that Uber Jason was going to be a new version of Jason that was available, they were having the Grendel map, I thought they're probably going to add in some more Jason X related things to the game if they were able to release that. I can't imagine that they wouldn't include like a new counselor. That was some of the last stuff that they added to the game before they had to kind of lock down, is they added 4 of the movie counselors. So Sheldon from part 3, Victoria from part 7, Fox from part 4, and Mitch Floyd from part 3. So I thought it would be interesting to have one of those Jason X counselors. They're not really counselors, they're like space explorers or whatever, but one of the victims from part 10. And I would love to see, obviously, if you've seen the movie, you know where I'm going with this. I would love the Jason X victim, counselor, spaceman, whatever, to be Janessa. I was so excited when I saw that Jason X was coming out. I looked it up on IMDb, and I saw that there was an actress who was credited with the character name Janessa. I think it would be so cool to be able to play as Janessa in Friday the 13th, the game. I also think it would be really cool because I imagine you're still going to be able to choose from the available counselors. So I think some sort of fashion pack, some sort of clothing pack that makes them look like the space explorers from Jason X. I think that would be something that would be really useful, really kind of make the game work together. Not that you would have to use it, but just it would make it more kind of coherent to release a fashion pack for those 10 original counselors. Now, any of the fashion packs haven't included the licensed characters, and I'm sure that that has something to do with the fact that you're using the actual image of a person who existed in that movie, so they're not able to give them like a Halloween costume or a spring break costume. So what they've done is they give you color swaps, but they only have their original sort of movie outfit. So I think for the 10 original, the original characters, even though they're based on actual characters from Friday the 13th, I think it would be interesting to have a fashion pack that would make them look like Jason X space explorers. And of course we have to have a counselor named Janessa. Come on. And she should be awesome. For number 9, I have another map that I think could be kind of interesting. They've given us a bunch of different places around Crystal Lake. So we've got the original Crystal Lake camp from part 1. We've got Packanack from part 2. We've got Higgins Haven from part 3. We've got the Jarvis house from part 4. We've got Pinehurst from part 5. So I thought it could be interesting to expand into the town a little bit. So what if we got some of the locations? Several of the movies have featured the diner. So the diner, Sally's Diner, has been in part 1. There was a diner in part 9. I think there was a diner in part 4 or 5. So having a diner, maybe a police station, and maybe expanding closer to town could be something that would also bring more of the sort of surrounding community into the game. That could be a way to get it away from the water. Now, Jason doesn't go too far from Crystal Lake except for part 8, but I think that that could be a way to help expand out into other areas. Number 8 is a new counselor. I would love to have Annie from part 1. She was the first big cinematic death. She wasn't the first person that was killed in Friday the 13th. If you haven't seen it came out in 1980, so fuck your spoiler alerts. But she was the first like big death in the movie. There were the 2 counselors that were killed like back in 58 or whatever, but like as the movie starts, of the new crew that's there to reopen Crystal Lake, Annie is the one that gets picked up. She's hitchhiking and she gets killed on her way to camp, so they never even meet her, the rest of the group. So I think that she could be really interesting to have her as one of the new counselors, as one of the movie counselors. I think she would be great because I know that actress, I think her name is Robbie Morgan. I'll put it on the screen if I'm wrong, but I think her name is Robbie Morgan or Robin Morgan. She is still doing conventions and she's still around, so I think it would be really great because they've had, as much as possible, the original actors come back and do some voice work for it. So I think it would be great to have her and include her as a counselor. Number 7 is another map. Obviously, we've got all of them like 1 through 5, so we've got a lot of maps here, but I think the section of Crystal Lake that's used in Part 7, and I think that that's the one, the New Blood, that has Tina, who kind of battles Jason. She's got the psychic powers, and one of the key parts of that map is the dock, because her father dies on that dock, and then her father is kind of wrapped up in the end of that movie and all that kind of stuff. And so I think you could have maybe an Easter egg in the water of like her father appears or something. But they did a really great job on the other maps of recreating the exact locations from the film. And I think it would be great to see that little section that they use in Part 7, including the dock where Tina's dad died. I think that that could get us up against the water in a really interesting kind of way. Now, the next 3 on my list are all connected. They're all related to the same movie, and that is Freddy vs. Jason. That was such a big fan-awaited film. Now, people feel some type of way about it. Some people love it. Some people hate it. It's very polarizing. But I think that it's definitely 2 of the big powerhouses of horror coming together. So I think having some content related to that could be really cool. So number 6 would be a new map, and that would be some of the locations featured in Freddy vs. Jason. So you could have the police station, the hospital, instead of cabins, we could have houses. There's a cornfield that's used in that. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do it. And I think that now we're getting to the part of the list where I think I started to think about how you could change the gameplay. Because I know that with the Grendel, I really do believe that they were going to start shifting gameplay and giving you new gameplay options, new ways to play, new ways to win. And so I think that that could be really interesting. And so what we could do with Freddy vs. Jason is maybe there could be some sort of division between being awake and being in a dream. And so that could be something that alters with the map. So maybe locations change during the course of the game, whether you're awake or you're asleep. So maybe the first half you're awake, then you're asleep. Something like that where it kind of goes in and out, or maybe different sections of the map falls under different, or maybe like it's kind of a rolling thing where different parts of the map are under different rules based on what's happening. So that could be a way to really change up the gameplay that I think would be really interesting. And of course, for number 5, if we're going to bring in a new map, if we're going to start referencing a new movie, we have to have a new movie counselor, right? I would love to see Kia. Of course, Kia from Freddy vs. Jason was played by Destiny's Child's own Kelly Rowland. I would love to see her in Friday the 13th, the game. She was sassy, she was fun. I loved her in that movie. She did have a naughty word that people have talked a lot about the homophobia in that movie. She dropped a little F-bomb and not the 4-letter one that you're thinking about. And so there's been a lot of criticism about why they included that and was it necessary and what does that say about horror and queer people and all that kind of stuff. That aside, I think that Kelly Rowland's Kia would be a fantastic addition to the lineup of counselors. And for number 4, also related to Freddy vs. Jason, is new killers. And this is also something where I think it's a long shot, but it would be really interesting in terms of how you could change the gameplay. And that would be a Freddy vs. Jason version of Jason and Freddy Krueger. Now that obviously is a whole licensing rights issue nightmare, I'm sure. They're already in a nightmare, let's bring in a new one, right? I think it would be really cool to have a Freddy vs. Jason version of Jason and also have Freddy. And that could really alter the gameplay. So not only could the map, with different sections having to do with being awake or being asleep, maybe having Freddy in the game, he could either be playable as the killer, and maybe now if you've got a team of 8, instead of having 7 counselors and Jason, maybe 2 of the people get randomly selected to be killers. One of them is Jason, one of them is Freddy. And maybe they work against each other. So maybe they work together Or maybe they can work against each other. Maybe Freddy and Jason actually have skills that can work against each other. I think that could be really interesting sort of dynamic gameplay. So if you're chosen as Jason or Freddy, do you focus on killing the counselors or do you focus on killing the other killer? And that could really bring in an interesting style of gameplay if you focused on Freddy versus Jason. So it's a long shot. I think that would be so much of a licensing headache, but I think that could be such a cool idea for a game that would bring a whole new dimension to the gameplay of having, or even having Freddy in the game, not necessarily as a playable character, but maybe he exists on that map and maybe he thwarts Jason or he attacks Jason, but also can be dangerous to the counselors. Maybe not kill them, but can injure them. There's all different ways that they could do it that I think would be very interesting. Now for number 3, what I thought could be really cool is including some of the final girls. So far, the 4 that have been added are all people who were victims in the series. They haven't included anybody who actually survived a movie. So I think it could be really cool to bring in some of those final girls. Alice from part 1 especially. Ginny from part 2. I think those 2 especially could be great because both of those actresses, Adrienne King and Amy Steele, are very active on the convention circuit. And so I think that it could be fairly easy to entice them back to do some voice work for those particular counselors. Now, I'm not sure why they've only done the victims. Maybe it was based on people who were available to do the voice work. Maybe it's the fact that they were victims, so being killed in the game doesn't seem to mess with things as much. But they do have Tommy Jarvis, and Tommy Jarvis is the only character to recur in 3 different movies and survives all 3 movies. So he can get killed in the game. Why not have one of the final girls? I think it would be amazing to be able to play as Alice, to be able to play as Ginny. And I think that they should be some of the better counselors in the game. They survived until the end, so they should have good skill points. I think it would be great to see them, and I think, Chris from part 3, Trish from part 4, every film has some sort of final girl that you can include that I think would be really interesting. Number 2 is another killer. And for this one, and this again might push the gameplay in a different direction, and that would be Mrs. Voorhees. I love Mrs. Voorhees. I love the first film because I really think Jason is interesting. Jason is kind of cool, but he doesn't talk. He just shows up and he's unstoppable and just kills everybody in sight. And I think that she's much more interesting and you get much more from her. And I think having her available as a killer could be really interesting. And people are saying, oh, but what about the gameplay? What about the gameplay? I don't think you would have to change the gameplay that much to have Mrs. Voorhees. Now, maybe you wouldn't have the sweater. Maybe you would have something else instead of the sweater. So maybe instead of the sweater, you put in Jason's teddy bear. Could be an item that works in the same way that the sweater does. Or even still have the sweater. Maybe there's another sweater still somewhere around the camp. I think that there's a way that you could do it to kind of stun her. Because obviously they have Part 5 Jason, and Part 5 Jason isn't even really Jason. It's the ambulance driver, Roy Moore, I think is his name. And they did different things with him. So he still hears Mrs. Voorhees' voice. He still is affected by the sweater, even though he's not Jason Voorhees. And then they have a different cinematic for him at the end of the game, where he doesn't hear Mrs. Voorhees talking to him, he just walks off into the night. So I think that you could do Mrs. Voorhees with a few little tweaks where you wouldn't even have to change up the gameplay that much. Now, I think you could change up the gameplay, and that could be fun, right? You could do something very different. She could have her butcher knife, could be her main weapon. So maybe she has to be a little bit closer to you. Maybe she has different skills. Maybe there's something that she can do that would be very different. So I think that would be very interesting. And also, another thing that they had announced before the game kind of went on lockdown was a new paranoia mode where you didn't just have to worry about Jason, you also maybe had to worry about some of the other counselors as well, and maybe that could affect how you played the game. That could be really interesting, seeing how that paired with Mrs. Voorhees as part of the mix. I don't know how they would do it, but I think there's really compelling ways to change up the gameplay by including Mrs. Voorhees as well. And number 1, the thing that I would love to see the most, if I could only have one thing on this list, it would be this, and that is a new counselor from Part 7, Tina. And I think having Tina not just as an available counselor, but having her like a new Tommy Jarvis in the game. I think that having her be somebody who can spawn from one of the escaped or murdered counselors could be really interesting. Because that is another way that we could change up gameplay. Because Jason, I feel like, is overpowered. I don't know if they just feel like because Jason in the movies is so unstoppable, he has to be kind of unstoppable. If you've got a group of counselors that are actually doing what they should be doing and working together, you might escape. Or if you have somebody who's just not very good at playing Jason. But if you have somebody who's good at Jason, and if you have people who are either not good at being counselors or just kind of dicking around, it's so hard to win. It's so hard. I think it would be cool to bring in Tina and have those active powers that you could use against Jason. They could maybe find a new way to win. And that's why I snuck in the map from part 7. That could be something that they could build into that map specifically, that maybe if you use the radio, instead of calling Tommy, it calls Tina. And maybe there's a way to win where instead of killing Jason, where you have to have Tommy and you have to have the machete and you have to have the sweater and all that kind of stuff, maybe there's something that you do on that dock, and then Tina's father comes up and chains Jason to the lake. I think that could be really cool as a new way to win, as a way to really change up gameplay. And I think that having a new way to fight Jason and to take on Jason. And so there's all different ways that you could do her that would make her really compelling and make her really interesting. Tommy is best when he is in groups with other people. So he gets more experience points if he helps people escape. So if you get resurrected as Tommy and you just like escape immediately, I mean, fine, you escaped or whatever, but you get more experience points if you like escort other people out and help them escape. Maybe Tina's the opposite. Maybe Tina is really powerful and she can do things to Jason, but maybe she gives a disadvantage when she's in proximity to other people. So maybe she needs to be around people to like complete the game. There's all different ways that they could do it. I'm not saying how they would have to do it. I'm just saying that there's really interesting possibilities when you start to bring in Tina as another playable character. So that is my list of my 10 fantasy additions to Friday the 13th, the game. What did you think? Were there any that were also on your list? Is there anything that I missed? Something that you think should be in the game that I didn't mention? Is there a favorite counselor that you would love to see added? There's not a lot of maps left for them to do, but is there a map that you're thinking of that could be really interesting? And is there some new way that they could twist and change and alter the gameplay style that could really reinvigorate and make the game different and take it to the next level? Please let me know in the comments below. I love talking nerdy horror stuff, so definitely let me know. I'm always excited when I can combine horror with nerdiness and all that kind of stuff, so this is a fun video to do, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. Make sure you give it the thumbs up on the way out. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so that you can get notified of all future uploads. All of my social media will be linked down in the description box, as well as a link to my website, The World of Champagne, at janessaj.com. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you, and until I see you again, bye.
Are you going to do something with your shirt? You had talked about possibly showing your shirt.
Oh, yeah. I also want to give a little shout out in this video. This is not sponsored in any way. This is just me supporting people that I love. But my t-shirt that I'm wearing today, I'm going to stand up and give you a better view. Are you ready? This is my fabulous TGIF Friday the 13th shirt, and this is from Atomic Cotton. My friends Erica and Zach own Atomic Cotton. I met them through the horror convention that I go to, Days of the Dead, and they are amazing, fantastic people. Obviously, quarantine and lockdown has really put a hitch in everybody's plans, and they make a big chunk of their income from traveling to conventions, selling beautiful horror and pop culture t-shirts. So they also have a website. You can go to atomiccotton.com. They have this style available, as well as a lot of other fantastic horror, pop culture, interesting kind of t-shirts. So definitely go check them out. And if you place an order, let them know that Janessa sent you. This is not sponsored. I don't have a code or anything. I just really do. I love them, and I am so excited for them to be successful and make it through this quarantine. I know it's been hard on all of us, but I just wanted to include that as a little plug for them. So definitely check out atomiccotton.com. And if you forget, I'll have it linked in the description box below. wait for fucking Mad Max to go by.